Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to England once again, and we're having a look at a beer from a brewery that I've never tried anything from before. Now, these guys have had some very positive press in recent times. The English beer tubers tell me that this is a great brewery, and it has been on my radar actually for quite a wee while, but I've just never really come across any of their beers until fairly recently. But the beer we're looking at today is a style that they're not most well known for, but again, my English beer tubing colleagues tell me that this one is very, very nice. So, needless to say, I'm very curious to see how this one's going to turn out. Definitely cool to finally get a review for this brewery here on the channel as well. So, hopefully, it's a nice beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to East Sussex, a little town called Lewes, right in the south of England actually, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Beak Brewery. So this particular beer is called Oopla. It comes in at 10% ABV, and this one is an Imperial Stout with coffee and vanilla added into it. Now, I've had this beer maybe 2-3 months, something like that, and I'm pretty sure that I bought this at Kiosk over in Copenhagen, which would make sense because I probably bought this one thinking it would last for a little bit of time, and it's an Imperial Stout. I was going through a phase, I believe, a few months back where I wanted to try more Imperial Stouts because it was all about IPAs and lagers and stuff back then. But yeah, definitely cool to take a look at an Imperial Stout from Beak. And hopefully we can have a look at some of their IPAs the next time I'm back home in the motherland of Scotland. But yeah, as you know, if you've watched the channel for any length of time, huge fan of coffee stouts. And yeah, this one, a bit of coffee and vanilla, you can't really go wrong with that. But let's crack on and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Beak Brewery. Very first time they're featuring on the channel, as I mentioned already, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has that geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever takes your fancy. You can check out the playlist of beers from different countries as well, and you will find this one in the English playlist. But needless to say, your support that you give the channel is massively appreciated, and do get in touch with your beer and brewery recommendations. But anyway, let's go on to my brewery notes, and we'll talk a little bit about Beak Brewery then. So, Beak Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Lewes in East Sussex in the kind of southeastern part of England, and the company was founded by Daniel Tapper, who has a long background in food and drink journalism that goes back to about 2007 or so, and he worked quite a bit of time with The Guardian as well, actually, quite a well-known newspaper. But he's from Leeds originally in Yorkshire, and he got into drinking bitter with his grandfather, and then a little bit later on from this he progressed to cask ales, and he would apparently go around with his friends and try different cask ales and rate them out of 5, and this really just got him into the idea of beer, and it spiraled from there. But he took up brewing as a hobby during his spare time when he was travelling around with his journalism, and yeah, it was from there that the Beak project was born. But he originally founded Beak as a nomadic brewing project, and they've brewed beer at North Brewing and Northern Monk in Leeds, Beavertown and Partisan in London, and also at Burning Sky in Firle in East Sussex as well. But the first beer under the Beak Brewery name was produced in 2016, and they continued to brew as nomads until the summer of 2020. It was while brewing though at Burning Sky that Daniel met Robin Head Foreman, who he recruited as his brewer for Beak, and Robin is a graduate of the Heriot Watt Brewing and Distilling Programme in Edinburgh. But they found a new home in the Cliff Industrial Estate in Lewes in East Sussex. Apparently they had signed a 10-year lease on the premises just before the long lockdown in England started. But at the brewery, they've got a 15 BBL brew kit, which is around 2,400 litres when you convert it, and they started off with three 2,000 litre fermenters as well. They've got an on-site tap room which opened in 2021. I want to say it was April that it opened, if I remember correctly. And yeah, that opens Fridays and Saturdays from what I understand. So maybe we can get down there and visit it at some point. But as of October 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 110 different kinds of beer. And, you know, from looking through the list, it seems to be that these guys are best known for their different kind of hazy, New England, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, pale ales, double IPAs and stuff like this. So yeah, as I say, a brewery that's had a lot of positive press in recent times, and one that I do need to try and review a few more things from over the next wee while. I need to see what I can get back home in Scotland when I return there. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Beak Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. You can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about the different beers, and we'll see about adding more reviews to the channel from this brewery in the next while. But yeah, let's get on and have a little look at this beer itself. So, as you can see with this one, the artwork is kind of interesting. I do quite like that, and Beak of course do have, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Mikkeller actually. The Beak brewing beers always have these kind of types of style people on them. It doesn't say who does the oh no, it does. It says the illustration is by Jay Cover, so I wonder if that's like a house artist that they have. But you can see artwork on this one is really nice. You'll find similar artwork across all the Beak cans. Plain silver top on the can there, and it tells you a little bit about the beer on the side here as well. This unctuous Imperial strength stout was brewed with oats, flaked barley and a complex mix of crystal and roasted malts before being infused with whole vanilla pods and Brazilian coffee from our friends at Pharmacy, an independent micro roaster just down the road. Expect rich heavy aromas of cocoa, tobacco, white oak and licorice. So yeah, should be quite interesting. As you'll know, if you've watched the channel in recent times, we've been reviewing some Brazilian Imperial coffee stouts, and they've been outstanding. So if you do get the chance to try some Brazilian beers, I highly recommend it. So cool to see that they've got some Brazilian coffee in this one. You know, coffee beans are one of the most complex adjuncts that you can put in beer. You know, they can be grown, coffee beans are like hops, you know, you can grow them all across the world and they'll turn out differently because of different water and different soil profiles. And yeah, you've got the characteristics of the different beans. It's about the meters above sea level, the mazel, as well with coffee. You know, the higher the altitude at which you grow the coffee, the more likely you are to get fruit and aromatic qualities and all this sort of thing. And then you've got the roasting process, which can do lots of different things to the bean too. But yeah, as we said, Oopla Imperial coffee stout, this one with vanilla, 10% ABV. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what I paid for this one because I just can't remember, but this beer I'm pretty sure was bought at Kiosk in Copenhagen, so they might still have, pardon me, a couple of cans lying around. But yeah, I think this one, there was only maybe 2 or 3 left, and I got it because I wanted something from Beak Brewery. They didn't have any of the IPAs, and I think I maybe bought this about 6 months ago or something like that. So getting Beak beer wasn't that easy at the time, so I just snapped up what they had. And of course, Imperial Coffee Stout, I do enjoy these. But yeah, let's just line that back up again. But anyway, as you can see, this beer has poured pretty much exactly as you would expect from an Imperial Stout. So before the head disappears, I think it's safe to say we've got just under a half finger of a frothy, I would say medium tan head, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But yeah, that head is just fading away to be a nice kind of thin foamy layer. But I'll just let you have a wee look at the bubbles before we actually describe the beer a wee bit more in depth. But colour-wise, this one is pretty much what you would expect. So if we shine the light through it, it does have a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi Max coloured edge to it, but otherwise, it's pretty opaque, to be honest with you. It's black as night almost. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, thus you get a darker colour beer. Any adjuncts that you put in or any barrel aging that you do will affect the colour too. When it comes to black beers like, you know, stouts and imperial porters and stuff like that, it's a bit more difficult for the barrel to actually affect the colour of the beer, but some adjuncts as well, or most adjuncts aren't really affected. They don't really affect the colour of the beer when it comes to the black beers like this one. But yeah, I have seen it before with like beets and things, But yeah, the black colour of this one is almost certainly from the malt bill rather than anything else. And the beer, like I say, does have a little bit of a kind of opacity to it, which is probably due to the oats for the most part. But yeah, appearance wise, nothing really surprising about this one when you consider what style it is. I think we can move on and take a wee look at the aroma of the beer. So let's do it. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful aroma, this one. I don't know what it is about these, Imperial coffee stouts. I've had quite a few of them recently, but they just never, they just never get old. Um, Beautiful smelling beer, this one. You can smell the kind of coffee just giving the beer that richness. You've got a sweetness in there as well from the vanilla and so on, and then you've also got the kind of just, straight up stouty side of things as well. There is a little bit of green component and a good little bit of fruity character to the beer, but yeah, it's got everything you would kind of want from the style. So when you first smell this, it is a treat. Let's just say that. So yeah, let's just kind of go through the aroma logically as we always do. So yeah, absolutely, you're getting a little bit of that roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust backbone. That'll be, there'll be some black roasted malts in here, maybe some special beer. It doesn't mention special beer right enough, but, Nerd Brewing here in Skåne in Sweden, they love special beer, and there's something a wee bit distinctive about this. But yeah, definitely a bit of that roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust backbone. Absolutely a little bit of a kind of rye bread note, which I'm guessing will be coming from the different types of crystal. Crystal, if I remember rightly, is German malt. But yeah, roasty, well-fired bread crust. There's a little touch of woodiness in there, but you've got these big rye, kind of, sweet German rye bread notes to the beer. I can see why they say tobacco as well. When I was studying chemistry, we did quite a few experiments with tobacco and, like finding out its composition and so on, and it has this really sweet smell. The smell of tobacco is actually pretty nice, I think. So you get a lot of that in this beer. It smells like, some of the tobacco you get in it smells like the tobacco you get in your in these little bags. But yeah, definitely a lot of that going on in here. I can't see really why they say licorice in this one. For me, it is more like a kind of woody, tobacco-y note that comes out of this beer. But yeah, roasty, well-fired bread crust, sweet rye bread, some tobacco-y notes in there, and yeah, it's interesting. Let's see. The more that you smell of this beer as well, I think the vanilla takes a little bit of time to come out in this one. But on top of that kind of tobacco-y, bready note, you do get some kind of brown sugary characters and chocolate in this beer. So for me, there's a little bit of a kind of, 70-80% cocoa chocolate, like a dark chocolate, but with the vanilla, it gives you the impression of a kind of, it does give you the impression of a milky, it does give you the impression of a more milky chocolate, like a sort of 30-40% cocoa chocolate as well. And on top of that, there's certainly some kind of brown sugary notes in there. I do get quite a wee bit of that kind of treacly molasses character out of this one. But in fairness, I think a lot of the sweetness is coming from that more rye bready, tobacco-y type note. And the coffee's actually contributing a lot of sweetness, as is the kind of vanilla and chocolate notes. But yeah, there's definitely a wee touch of that treacle molasses, little touch of a lighter caramel as well. I'm not really getting any kind of biscuit note out of it, but when you've got crystal malt in there, crystal malt is always going to give you a little bit of brown sugar. The other thing I'd point out about this, I'd be very curious to know what the length of wort boil on this beer is, or if it's double mash or what. I think it's most likely to be like a double mash, because it's I could be wrong about it being double mash. I've not brewed an Imperial Stout, home brewed one in a long time, but the thing with this one is you don't get the big leathery brown sugary notes, which would be indicative of a long wort boil. Whenever you, as I say, when you boil the wort, the brown sugars will caramelise. And I know that, for example, Nerd Brewing here in Skåne, they love to use a very long wort boil, and you get big leathery brown sugary notes. But the brown sugar in this one is actually quite oily and quite sweet. So that makes me wonder, it's either it could well be a double mash, because it is very, very rich. But on top of the behind all of that stuff, I think we've covered the malty side of the beer fairly well. Behind that though, and just giving the beer more depth, you do have this the kind of coffee bean notes, and the coffee bean notes in this are lovely. I've always, from having tried a good few Brazilian Imperial coffee stouts now, I think I can safely say that they always tend to be very thick and you know, very rich as beers. But when it comes to the Brazilian coffee beans, they're always really bright and aromatic. And there's a few different, you know, Brazil's got a whole, I forget how many states it is, but Brazil's got a bunch of different states that Brazil's got a bunch of different states that they can grow coffee in, but you get this big aromaticity out of the coffee for sure. There's absolutely a little bit of a red fruity note to it. It's a little bit like a kind of black berry, I would say. It's got a little bit of tartness to it. Yeah, it's like a kind of blackberry and black curranty note that comes out of it. You can smell there's a little touch of earthiness there, but it seems like a very smooth roast. But for me, the coffee beans themselves, quite aromatic, a little bit red fruity, black curranty, blackberry-ish. And yeah, just a very smooth, light, smooth earthiness. And they're adding they're just adding a bit of depth to everything else that's in there, to be honest with you. I think that covers the kind of sweet side of the beer. Let's look at the hoppy and fruity side of things then. I say sweet, I mean, you know, yeasty and malty and adjuncty. But let's have a wee look at that hoppy side of the beer. Now for me, you still have a little bit of the green component in this one. I can't remember, I don't know how old this beer is, but it says it's best before the 27th of September 22 actually, so I didn't realise I'm drinking this one out of date. But you know, it's an Imperial Stout, it'll be fine, it will be fine. So maybe this beer is actually a year old or something like that. We do need to keep that in mind. Kind of strange that they would only put 1 year on the can as well, although it could be older than that, I really don't know. But yeah, from the hoppy side of things, you do get a little touch of earthiness out of the beer. There is a little bit of the remnants of a green component in there, some floral notes, a little bit of grassiness as well. Yeah, this is nice. I mean, you have got that nice oily green component for sure, but it's the longer you leave these beers, of course, Imperial Stouts are not the most hop forward styles, of course, and the green component will drop out, but you still get a little touch of earthiness, as I say, a bit of floral character and some nice oily grassiness to it. But then behind that, you do have the nice fruity notes to the beer. So for me, the fruity character that you get with this one, there is a bit of I get a bit of an oily plum. Don't get so much in the way of sharper raisins. I get a bit of an oily plum and a bit of a blackberry and black currant, you know, maybe a little touch of fig as well. But certainly the fruity notes that are coming from the hops are not the most pungent and sharp in this one. This is more about a kind of plum, a fig and a black currant for me. But I mean, regardless, it's a beautiful smelling beer, this one. And I'm certainly very curious to try it and see how we go. So yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck in. But yeah, we are going to try this one now. I've got a paper to finish, so the Imperial Stout is going to be my sipper as we go along with this report. So yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we go. So this is the Oopla, a 10% Imperial Stout with Brazilian coffee and vanilla in it. My first beer from Beak Brewery in Lewes in East Sussex down in England. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Oh yeah. Very nice, very smooth and kind of silky Imperial Stout, this one. That's lovely. That is good. It's a little bit of a change of pace from the other ones I've had recently. You know, as I've often said in Imperial Stout reviews, in the Nordic countries we are spoiled when it comes to the mouthfeel of these beers. Until recently, I'd always said that the mouthfeel that you get in the Nordic Imperial Stouts is very difficult to beat. I've never come across ones that are thicker than that, although the Brazilian ones that I've been having recently, I've really pushed them close. This beer kind of goes back to that a little bit. This one, it's definitely a bit lighter in the mouthfeel, this one, but it gives you everything you'd want in terms of flavour profile. What I'm also noticing with this beer, you've seen me I've only taken one sip of this, but this beer it starts off actually really nice and smooth and silky and sweet, but then you start to get the more kind of roasty, toasty coffee and black malty notes out of this. This is quite an interesting beer from that perspective. Lovely composition, this one, so it's a big thumbs up from me. You can tell it's a well done beer and it gives you what you want from the style. So many beers out there these days that it's difficult to be kind of blown away by stuff, but this is really pretty damn solid, I have to say. Yeah, need to try a few of the lighter things from this brewery as well, I think. But let's go through this one and describe it properly as we always do. Yeah, it's lovely, this one. As I say, when you take it in, it's lovely and smooth and silky and sweet. Then the roasty, toasty bitterness builds out of it the further into the aftertaste you go. Beautiful, beautiful beer. Yeah, middle third of the palate then. Let's start there. So the backbone of the beer, you've got that lovely roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust coming out of it. And that is that. When you move further forward on the middle third of your palate, just toward the front, you'll get a little touch of woodiness in there, but then yeah, on top of the well-fired bread crust, you've got quite like a dense rye bready character. It's a bit drier and less sweet than I thought it was going to be from the aroma, but yeah, definitely roasty well-fired bread crust and then a bit of dense rye bread character on top of that. There is a wee bit of a wholemeal bready note on top. You know, the crystal malts are going to give you the crystal malts in this are going to give you all that complexity of breadiness in there. But the bread, as I say, is not quite as sweet as I thought it was going to be from the aroma. And the interesting thing is, I can see from tasting the beer, I was thinking with the aroma, they said on the can licorice. And I was thinking from the aroma, nah, it's more tobacco. But I can see why I can see why they say licorice, having tasted the beer now. So on top of the kind of, I don't know if it's right to say on top or within the bready character, when that develops a wee bit more, you start to get a little bit of that tobacco-y note to it. But as I say, there is, it's kind of tobacco-y toward the back of the middle third of your palate, but a wee bit further forward it is potentially a little bit more licoricey, if that makes sense. And then on top of the bready layer, you start to get the kind of chocolatey character to the beer. So at the back of the middle third of your palate, you get the higher percentage cocoa, the 70-80% cocoa chocolate. And then as you move further forward, you start to get the more milky chocolate, the 30-40%, and the vanilla, of course, mixes in with that as well. And I think the vanilla gradually pushes its way out of the beer the further you go into the aftertaste too. The interesting thing about this too is that there's not quite as much in the way of brown sugar in the flavour as there was in the aroma. So this is a beer where I'd say the aroma and flavour do diverge a little bit. And yeah, it's almost, you almost get a little bit of that licoricey type flavour in the middle of your palate too, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, there is a little element of brown sugary character there. So the licoricey notes sit on top of the chocolate type thing. And yeah, you've got a little bit of kind of oily, you've got a little bit of that kind of oily brown sugary character in there. So there is a little bit of a treacly molasses note in the dead centre of your palate. The beer is 10%, that's covering the alcohol. As you move out from that, you get a little touch of sweet caramel. But as I say, it's almost like that's kind of surrounded by this little licoricey note, and then underneath that you've got the kind of chocolatey layer that we had. So yeah, bread crust, rye bread, wholemeal bread, a bit of the kind of tobacco-y licoricey thing in there as well. Then you've got the chocolate layer, and then you've got the kind of brown sugary notes as well. You've got a whole host of things. The complex part of this beer really is the middle third of the palate actually. But the other thing we haven't talked about yet is the coffee. So let's look at the back third of the palate and the kind of border region. So for me, yeah, the coffee bean sits in that border region between middle third and back third of your palate. So you get a nice little bit of kind of build up in there. You can feel the coffee bean, but again, we'll come back to that. The base of the back third of the palate, the roasty toasty bread crust, the presence of that is even stronger and even drier. You've got the rye bread, which feels a little bit taller and a bit more airy. You've also got that slightly more dense wholemeal bready character in there as well. So yeah. That's definitely in there. But then on top of that, you can feel the coffee bean sits in the border region and pushes over the top. It pushes over the top of the bready sides of the beer. And for me, the coffee bean, it's a lot more roasty and toasty as well in the flavour than it was in the aroma. The earthiness is a bit stronger and it feels the roast is a little bit drier in a way. But you still get a lot of aromaticity out of it. And you have that kind of blackberry note in there. So like I say, the coffee bean is sitting in that border region between it's sitting in that border region between the middle and back third of the palate. So yeah, I like how that goes together. But yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really quite interesting. But as I say, this beer's kind of caught me off guard a little bit because of how, the flavour and the aroma in this one really go about things in different ways, but it takes away nothing from the quality of the beer. This one is quite nice actually. I like the fact that it shows you a little bit of the kind of Russian Imperial Stout side of things, but the coffee just kind of amplifies it. It's really like that. If we were putting this one in a sort of sub-style bracket for Imperial Stouts, it is like a Russian Imperial Stout with coffee. So it does, in some ways, it has the nice roasty toastiness that you get from some of these Nerd Brewing ones over here in Skåne as well, which again I can quite appreciate. So yeah, on top of that kind of coffee layer though, you start to get the more airy notes out of the kind of yeast. You get a little bit of that more airy, slightly brown bready kind of thing. It's like a little bit of a kind of brown sugary brown bread for sure. But yeah, the yeasty notes sit a little bit further up. But on the back third of the palate, as we said, you get that nice, you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller. Then as you come further forward, things just squash together that little bit more. And yeah, it does go together very, very nicely that way. The malt, and I think we've covered everything in the sort of malty and yeasty side of the beer. Let's look at the hoppy and fruity side of things then. So, back corners of the palate, you absolutely have a little bit of earthiness here for sure. So yeah, nice little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, there's a little bit of a kind of herbal character, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of the palate, you've got a little bit more kind of floral aromaticity to it. Round the front curve of the tongue, you've got a little bit of a lighter, grassy sort of thing as well. And I would say that the green component in this beer is more oily rather than anything else, but like I say, every when it comes to every one of these flavours will drop out as you age this beer a little bit more. But we're actually drinking this one a month or so out of date, which is kind of funny. I didn't even think to check that because it was an Imperial Stout. But yeah, nothing wrong with that. But yeah, a little bit of earthiness. The earthiness actually comes forward quite a bit on the sides of the palate. Some nice oily floral notes, bit bright, and then round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy for sure. But let's look at the front third of the palate then. Border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up there. Then the base of the front third of your palate is more kind of smooth and bready and things like that. But yeah, the way that that goes together is really nice. So, on top of that, you have a really nice, you have all the kind of fruity notes coming out of this beer. And what I will say is, when you take this beer in, you do get a little bit of that sharper raisin that I wasn't picking up in the aroma. But then, so you a little bit of sharp raisin, not so much in the way of an oily plum underneath. It actually goes straight to like a kind of juicy fig, and the raisins actually kind of sit there as well. So the back half of the front third of your palate is more like a kind of juicy fig, and then as you move further forward, it starts to become more kind of blackcurranty, and on the front half of the front third of your palate, it is more like a slightly wetter, juicier blackberry, actually. Maybe a little touch of cherry as well, actually. come to think of it. Yeah. Yeah. Fruity side of this one, yeah. Raisins, figs. As you move forward, blackcurrant, blackberry, a little bit of cherry. I think that describes it really nicely, to be honest with you. So in that sense, the beer gets a big thumbs up from me. I think this goes together very, very nicely. So yeah, as I say, a big thumbs up to Beak Brewery for this beer. I think they've done a great job with it. The flavour profile, it's got a bit of everything, really complex, and it's made me think a little bit. But, you know, as I say, aroma and flavour diverge quite a little bit, so it was kind of surprising in that sense. Let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So, like I said, this is not the thickest of Imperial Stouts that I've come across. This one's actually a bit lighter, so I would describe this one as being kind of top end of mid-bodied for me. Mouthfeel is a little bit wet. It has a degree of slickness and slightly silky character to it. But yeah, definitely one of the wetter Imperial Stouts I've had. In terms of IBUs, there's a good bit of bitterness from the coffee and the malt, and the hops are contributing to that as well. I wouldn't be surprised if this is sort of, 80 IBUs, 70, 80 IBUs, somewhere in that kind of region. The malt, as we said, bit of roastiness, bit of smoothness. There is a slight degree of sweetness to it as well. The adjuncts, of course, the coffee's giving you a bit of dryness, the vanilla's giving you a bit of sweetness, amplifying different flavours. And then you've got the fruity character to this one too, which is a little bit sharp, and then a little bit juicier later on. But overall, like I say, a really nice and enjoyable beer, this one, and certainly a very nice introduction to Beak Brewery, but absolutely want to try some of their IPAs and see what those are like. So, yeah, voice is starting to go. I think we can leave it at that for this review then. So this one was the Oopla, a 10% Imperial Stout with, more like a Russian Imperial Stout with Brazilian coffee and vanilla in it, from Beak Brewery in Lewes in East Sussex, just in the south of England. Definitely a nice introduction to this brewery. You will see them feature more on the channel in the future, but let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Beak Brewery as well. Do give me some beer and brewery recommendations, but check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Slange it, skull, cheers, check out Beak Brewery.